Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. For those who don't know me, I'm Julie Zuckerman, author of the Book of Jeremiah, and welcome to the January Literary Modiin author event. For those of you who are new here, this is a monthly author series featuring books with Jewish content, mostly fiction, but occasionally narrative, nonfiction, memoir, and poetry. We started this in 2019, June 2019. So this has been going on for over 6.5 years. It started as an in-person event, thus the name. And then with the pandemic, we switched to virtual, and sometimes we go back to having regular in-person events. But anyway, this is our 68th event. So hooray. Um, the format of today's event is that each author will speak for 15 minutes and then we open it up to questions. And we have a very large attendance today. So everyone's on mute, but you can put your questions in the chat box. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can just send a private note in the chat to me. Okay, so I would like to introduce our first author. Merav Fima is a writer, translator, and literary scholar currently based in Melbourne, Australia. She's the author of the short story collection Late Blossoms from Vine Leaves Press and the forthcoming Sephardic migration novel The Rose of 13 Petals and the Pomegranate Tree, which is coming out later this year. She holds a PhD in creative writing from Monash University, and her work has appeared in anthologies and literary journals worldwide. And it doesn't say this in your bio, but she's also a graduate of the Shandy Rudolph program at Bar-Ilan University in creative writing. And she has published in journals worldwide, including Minjin Quarterly, Parchment, Poetica Magazine, and the Australian Book Review. So I'm now going to spotlight Merav and take it away, Merav.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm so honored to be speaking here tonight. It's 5 o'clock in the morning here in Melbourne, among all these brilliant writers. And I really am so glad to see so many familiar faces in the audience. I'm also, even though I've never met Lihi or Mikhail in person, I feel connected to both of them since I grew up in Montreal and went to the same university where Mikhail teaches. And Lihi's novel has really moved me so much. I feel it was so powerful in the authenticity of the representation of early motherhood, and especially for women artists who often lose their identity. And yet my book, Late Blossoms, actually deals with childlessness. And so in a room of one's own, Virginia Woolf writes that it would be interesting to imagine a meeting between the four great English novelists of the 19th century: Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Emily Bronte, and George Eliot. She states the only thing they had in common is that not one of them bore a child. I, too, thought it would be fascinating to imagine just such a meeting between the great female writers, poets, and artists of Israel's founding generation, familiar as I am, 3 times a migrant myself, with the hardships associated with maintaining one's creative practice in a foreign land. This collection of linked short stories about 10 migrant women artists and poets in mid-20th century Jerusalem originated with my master's thesis for the Shandy Rudolph graduate program in creative writing at Bar-Ilan University. It has blossomed over nearly 2 decades into its present form after a friend suggested that I expand the initial 2 stories, Late Blossoms and Degeneration, into a series of linked stories set at the Ticho House Salon. The first story sets the scene, demonstrating the effects of the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 on members of different faith communities and its reverberations into the 21st century. The following 6 stories are set at a literary salon hosted at the Jerusalem residence of painter Anna Ticho and her husband, renowned ophthalmologist Dr. Albert Ticho, in mid-20th century Jerusalem. While it is known that the Tichos regularly hosted many artists and intellectuals in their home, the meetings are purely imagined, blending fact and fiction. Each story features as its protagonist a different character, inspired by historical figures, among them Anaticho, Mikhail Blaustein, Michaela Micheleret, Zelda Schneerson-Mishkovsky, Elsa Lasker-Schuller, Leah Goldberg, and Nellie Sachs. Meeting on a regular basis to share their creative work and discuss the challenges of writing and painting in a new and unfamiliar environment, different language and culture. These women shaped the emerging state of Israel's literary, artistic, cultural, and intellectual scenes. Like their British predecessors, they had no children. The collection concludes with 3 contemporary stories, extending the legacy of these historical figures to fictional women engaged in Israel's current art scene. I'll now read a short excerpt from the opening of the title story, Late Blossoms, which introduces the character of Anaticho, focusing on her artistic block and how she learns to appreciate even the desolation of Jerusalem as a source of painterly inspiration, while shifting her identity from that of hostess and nurse to that of artist in her own right. Late Blossom. It wasn't I who chose Jerusalem as the subject of my work. Rather, Jerusalem chose me, Anaticho. Anna ventured up the stairs to the attic for the first time since their move to Palestine, where she had, more than a decade earlier, followed and married her cousin, Dr. Albert Ticho, at the tender age of 18. In her left hand, she held a cotton canvas, watercolors, and a box of charcoal. Her right thumb and forefinger lifted the hem of her brown dress. She strained her eyes behind her thick oval lenses, handcrafted by her husband, which were gradually accumulating dust and snowflake formations. She struggled to see the sharp incline of the narrow stone steps in the darkness, and she ascended slowly, frequently stopping to adjust the sliding paint boxes and to catch her breath, careful neither to trip over nor tear her gown. She tilted her head, concealing her nose behind the white collar of her blouse to protect herself from the dust. Her chin pointed to her brown leather boots, adorned with Swarovski crystals that glimmered with each step she took. She only wore those boots indoors, within the confines of her house, afraid to sully them in the dust and mud of the unpaved Jerusalem roads. Rubber boots and gingham dresses were the only materials suitable for outdoors, really, but there weren't too many occasions on which she left the house. She had everything she wanted and servants to fetch the things she needed. Only inside the house, furnished with imported mahogany and heavily framed masterpieces, did she feel as though she still were in her Moravian hometown. Only there could she indulge in the same luxuries to which she had been accustomed in her privileged youth. The cultural and social elite of Jerusalem gathered in her home as in a European salon to discuss current artistic trends and dominant philosophical concepts. She was a well-respected hostess. Her specialty Sachertorte, a perfect example of the traditional Austrian recipe, would be spoken of for days after being served. She yearned to resume painting, as she had in Europe, but found no inspiration in the barren landscape. She admired her peers, who created despite the emptiness. She was often moved to pick up a paintbrush, only to drop it again, leaving the canvas blank. Nothing comes from nothing, she'd remind herself. It is impossible to create a beautiful painting in this desolate city, surrounded by desert hills. There's nothing here to paint but muddy streets and slums. Nothing at all inspirational. Painting should immortalize beauty. Ugly things are never worthy of paint and canvas. Not to mention, this direct sunlight distorts my perspective, even of the things I most enjoyed painting in Europe. She thus avoided painting, though she preferred it even to baking. That day, she climbed up to the attic to find storage space for her painting supplies, tired of being constantly reminded of her lack of productivity each time she encountered them. The idea for this collection started taking shape after I joined a walking tour of Jerusalem in the footsteps of poetesses and visited the historic homes of Rachel, Zelda, Leah Goldberg, and Elsa Lasker-Schuller, all the while reciting their extraordinary verses and seeing with my own eyes some of the cityscapes that had inspired their poetry. The story Late Blossoms, from which I just read, came to me after sitting with friends at the Ticho House Cafe and reading about the history and architecture of the house on the back of the menu. That's when I started picturing Anna as she moved through the historic house and developed her character as an aspiring artist within that setting. Ticho House gained personal significance for me as a site of cultural activity in Jerusalem when I started working there as an editor at the Israel Museum. I contributed to exhibitions held at Ticho House, now a branch of the museum, and was so moved by its charm that I chose it as the venue for my wedding. Ticho House has continued to inspire Jerusalem's contemporary writers and artists, such as the late Aaron Appelfeld, who I would often see sitting at a corner table at the cafe, writing a chapter a day of his newest novel, Longhand. Throughout this collection of literary and historical fiction, the characters struggle with their fragmented and often clashing identities as women, spouses, Jews, and migrant artists in an attempt to reconcile their artistic practice and commitment to European aesthetics with their ethical worldview and devotion to the values of the fledgling state. At times, they also suffer persecution because of their gender and ethnicity. Yet, they remain committed to the pursuit of their art as a fulfillment of their social responsibility and true passion. Late Blossoms captures a vivid image of Jerusalem, past and present, through the eyes of its diverse inhabitants, while exploring such universal challenges as childlessness and unrequited love, as well as discrimination by the patriarchal literary and artistic establishments of their time. As such, it gives a voice to the women writers, artists, and poets of Israel's founding generation, imagining what their perspective might have been at that foundational stage in the country's political, social, and cultural development. Though they were not always appreciated, their love for the city of Jerusalem never wavered, and they continued to maintain their passion for their art. Although the majority of the stories are based on my research into the lives and works of historical figures, I have taken poetic license in constructing the encounters between them in order to explore their most profound emotions and experiences as women and as migrant artists. While in these stories, it may at times be difficult to distinguish between historical fact and invention. I feel that this is the beauty of fiction. Though it may be helpful to conduct extensive research in order to ground the fictional story in factual details that are recognizable to the reader, each writer may take poetic license in order to give full expression to their imagination. The final story in the collection, Rose Among the Thorns, offers a taste of my forthcoming mystical Sephardic migration novel, The Rose of 13 Petals and the Pomegranate Tree, coming out with Running Wild Press next January. This story illustrates how my work on this short story collection and my engagement with both biblical and modern Hebrew poetry inspired a longer literary work. I'll end with a short excerpt from the end of the story, in which the contemporary protagonist, a young aspiring poet, experiments with mystical literature in order to find love, but instead discovers her own poetic identity. When nearly a year had passed and I still wasn't engaged, I decided to take more drastic measures. Reading the Song of Songs had proved insufficient. It would behoove me to transcribe the text in order to contemplate every letter. I made my way to the old city, where my feet instinctively led me to Bina's gallery, and asked her to teach me how to create my own micrography, like the one she had sold me several years before as a gift for my grandparents. The technique is really quite simple. You just have to be in the right state of mind. What do you mean? Start envisioning an image from the Song of Songs. How about the rose among the thorns? That will do. Begin by outlining the rose in pencil and decide where you would like the biblical text to begin and end. Use colored pens to inscribe the verses along the outline. Once the ink is dry, you can erase the pencil marks, et voila! I made several sketches, my handwriting becoming more compact with each attempt, but felt that it was all mere craft and artifice. Bina examined my drawings. They lack soul. I want you to do this on the next full moon. Meditate on the following verses from the Zohar, the Book of Radiance, and its mystical interpretation of the Song of Songs. A song that is holy of holies, as the highest divine name is crowned by it, because all of its words are love and joy. I thought you weren't supposed to study the Zohar before the age of 40. Isn't it dangerous? Not if it's done with a proper intention, Bina reassured me. Besides, the best things in life come with a risk. I was willing to risk it for the prospect of marriage. Sitting at my desk, I closed my eyes and contemplated the verses Bina had dictated. The brilliance of the full moon penetrated my eyelids. Each ray of moonlight dissolved into the 7 colors of the spectrum as it traversed the prism of my retina. I opened my eyes, and the white page glowed in the luminescence of the moonlight, forming a halo around the rose petals I had unknowingly traced with my eyes closed. I felt my own words flowing out of my heart, mingling with the sacred scriptures as the ink flowed from the pen. I had never shown my poetry to anyone except Bina. She was the first person who ever believed in me, the only one who encouraged me to pursue my passion. I sought to conceal my poetic words in minuscule script, illegible to the naked eye, ashamed of the desperation and vulnerability they articulated. Thou shalt not take God's name in vain. Why did you betray me? Why did you breathe the 4 letters of the holiest name, Ahava, crowning the common name? You did not allow the Shekhinah to dwell among us, and your soul did not cling to mine with a kiss of your mouth, for you are a locked garden. You have sought only to nestle your head in my fragrant chest, to caress my dark skin. But my heart is awake and your heart is deaf to the throbbing between my breasts. This was my first poem to take concrete form, the words shaping the rose's red petals, green leaves, and brown thorns. As I placed the Hebrew letters side by side on the paper, I felt a burning sensation in my fingertips and an unexpected warmth in my heart. Thank you very much.
Well, kavod. Thank you, Merav. Thank you. That was great. You'll see in the chat everybody was commenting on, first of all, what you win Mother of the Year for doing your reading like that. And what a fascinating idea and concept that you came up with to imagine all these writers together. So I'm gonna remove your spotlight and introduce our next author, and you guys think of your questions for Merav. Okay. Lihi Lapid is a best-selling author, journalist, and speaker on contemporary women's issues. She has written 3 best-selling novels on her own, Secrets from Within and Women of Valor, and I Want It to Be Wonderful, which was just translated this past year, or a few months ago, or it came out a few months ago in English, I should say. Um, and that was a result of for over 10 years, she was writing a weekly column in Yediot Achronot, and the columns were gathered into the book. Oh, and here it says, I can't always be wonderful in your bio, but I think it's I want to. Prior to becoming a writer, she was a professional news photographer. She lives with her husband, Yair Lapid, politician and former prime minister of Israel, and their two children in Tel Aviv. Lihi is also the president of a nonprofit organization, Shekel Inclusion for People with Disabilities. So, Lihi, I'm going to spotlight you, and please take it away.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I just think that instead of reading my book, you just saw Merav here with her baby, and it concludes everything that I said. Merav, you are saying none of them was a mother? None of those poets?
So
Just a second.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Elsa Lasker Schiller had a son called Paul, but he died before she came to Israel. And
Okay.
Anna Sufo had a baby who died in infancy and then many miscarriages.
Wow. I didn't know. Like, really, it's like, okay, now you need to translate it into Hebrew so I can read. And but Julie, connect us because it sounds so great. So hi everybody. I think I was with you. First of all, Susan, I saw you in a few hours ago. So I'm sorry if I'll repeat myself. We had another Zoom about books. So hi everybody. And I think I was here a few months ago or maybe a year ago or two when On Her Own was
A year, I think
published.
exactly a year ago, or
Yeah.
February, maybe last year.
So what happened was that I was interviewed for a podcast by a woman named Zibi Owens, that she has stores for books and she's a publisher. And we talked before because I was part of a book called uh, Being Jewish Now, a book that she published with, I think, like 80 writers that wrote about what is for them to be Jewish now. Now, at the middle of the war, it was published in America with, I think I was the only Israeli that participated. So when she prepared herself to the podcast, she found out another book that I published like 10 years ago in Israel and also in English, but in Israel. Uh, and she read it, and with tears in her eyes, in the middle of the podcast, she was like, wow, I need to publish it in English. I really, really need to publish it in English in America. I have to say that On Her Own was published in HarperCollins, which is you are book lovers, so I'm taking you to the kitchen where we prepare books and talk to publishers and things like that. So On Her Own was published in HarperCollins, which is a huge publication house, but it was published at the middle of the war, and it was really, really difficult to even have the opportunity to talk about it. And when she published I Wanted to Be Wonderful, from just falling in love with it, she did a big thing with the Jewish community, and it's jumped kind of very, very quick to the USA Today bestseller list. That surprised me really, really very much. And it was also a huge bestseller in Israel when it was published. I want to say something. I was writing a column for 15 years, a weekly column about women and about being a woman today, and about family issues and life Uh, it's a column that started from recipes and slowly became my heart and my home and my really everything that uh, and kind of after a few years that I wrote it, I said I want to write something about motherhood. I'm thinking, Merav, all the time about your book, really about writers. I remember there was one time that I was in Netanya and they were doing this feminist thing, and someone wrote a slogan called saying, even Mother Teresa didn't have kids. Like, you can go to Africa and save other kids when you don't need to carry your kid at 5 o'clock in the morning and breastfeed. So in a way, it's like, so I decided to write a book about family. I didn't want to write about my family. I just wanted to write something, but then my family burst into my book and I couldn't stop it. And I was very scared because, on one hand, I'm married to this guy that is famous and his family is famous, and really talking about our family, it's kind of too much. And on the other hand, there was something that we never talked about, which I thought maybe it's time to talk about. And so I went to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, she's the author, Shulamit Lapid, an amazing Israeli author that wrote Value of Strength, which I recommend very much, about the chalutza that comes to Israel as a single mother, which is very rare and interesting at that time. So I came to her and I said, Shula, listen, I'm writing a book, and I'm like, when you write a book, do you write the whole truth? And she looked at me and she gave me the best advice for a writer. She said, when you write a book, you write the whole truth and then you erase a little bit. Because I think we censor ourselves a lot when we write, that someone would think what, like, I can tell you that on her own, I started in the first 2 pages, there is sex. And like my son said, I'm not reading that. Like, I don't care what it is about, but I'm not reading. So, so many times we censor ourselves because we're afraid um, to reveal things about us, but also for other people to feel. So I wrote the book. I finished writing. I started erasing, and I got to a point that there was one paragraph that I felt that if I'm erasing it, it's not the truth anymore, and if I'm leaving it, it's too much. It's too much. Exposing myself and my family. So I decided I won't publish it. And for a year and a half, it was just in the computer, but it burned inside my heart. I want to read you the paragraph that I was so hesitating about um, after not being able to erase it. I come one day to pick up my daughter from kindergarten, and her teacher says that something is wrong. I told her that we already paid attention that something is wrong and that she doesn't respond like all the other kids. And we have an appointment with an ear doctor. As the time passes until the crucial exam, we are surrounding our daughter and making noise, and she doesn't respond. And we throw things and make huge noise, and she doesn't respond. And we start asking people surrounding us if they know anything. And we start realizing maybe it's not just the ears. And at the night before the crucial exam, my man hugged me and I hug him, and none of us is falling asleep. And I'm praying that night. I'm praying, please, God, give me a deaf child. Please, I want a deaf child because all other possibilities are so much more frightening. Um, I published the book. Um, it was a huge thing that we talked about being parents for a girl with special needs. Yaeli today she's 29-year-old, and she's already a grown up. She's autistic. She doesn't speak. She's very like she's crushing the spectrum on the classic side, and but she took us to a journey that was heartbreaking and amazing at the same time, and and I crushed. But then there was one talk that you said, like, Lihi, listen, it's for life. It's not something that we will do something big and it will disappear. It's a journey for life, and this house needs to be happy again. We have other kids, and and I need you, and the house needs you. And I started the journey. Um, Publishing the book was part of the journey. It wasn't after publishing the book, I had a lot of people coming to me saying, come and do a lecture about being a special mother and for a special kid. And it took me a few years after I published the book, but um, but it was a huge bestseller. I think that's only part of the book, because the book is really dealing with the change that women are going through from being young women, free, with dreams, with their future, and becoming mothers that sits at 5 o'clock in the morning with their kid doing like that, but they are not giving up on their dreams. And those are the women I wrote about. But I think the shocking in the book was because it talked about what it makes to the marriage. uh, and there is one point, and it's very important, because I tried in this book not to be against men. It's not against anyone. It's just talking that feminism is wonderful, but when it reaches motherhood, it stays with no answers, like we said before. Um, um, there's one point in the book that was a changing point in my life, and it changed everything for me. I'm talking about it that the man, the prince, it's two stories that combine together. I won't tire you, but he stands, he comes back home, and instead of opening the door after a long day at work, he hesitates a little. He stands next to the door of his home, and he says, do I want to go in? Will she be very angry about me, about something? Very angry with me about something? Will she be just tired and angry? Or will she smile to me? And it was a point in my life that I realized that I'm dealing with my difficulties and my grief, and I really need to bring happiness into my home. So it's a book about accepting yourself, your family, and the difficulties. And I think its big emotional success is because it talks about a lot of things that we all are going through, and not a lot are talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lihi. Thank you. That was great. That was great. Okay. And now for something completely different, I will introduce our third author. Mikhail Iossel was born in Leningrad, USSR, now St. Petersburg, Russia, where he worked as an electromagnetic engineer and a security guard at the Central Park of Culture and Leisure, and belonged to an organization of Samizdat writers before immigrating to the United States in 1986. He's the author most recently of Sentence, a collection of one-sentence stories. His other books in English are Love Like Water, Love Like Fire, a winner of the 2021 Quebec Writers Federation Paragraph Hugh McLennan Prize for Fiction, Notes from the Cyberground, Trumpland and My Old Soviet Feeling, and the story collection Every Hunter Wants to Know. Founding director of the Summer Literary Seminars International Literary Programs, and he is a frequent contributor to The New Yorker. His stories and essays have also appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Foreign Policy, Best American Short Stories, and elsewhere. A Guggenheim National Endowment for the Arts and Stegner Fellow. He has also taught in universities throughout the United States and is now an associate professor of English at Concordia University in Montreal. So I will spotlight you and you can take it away.
Thank you, and really glad to be here. Thankful for the invite. It's a privilege, it's a joy, and so thank you. Yeah, the book, this is a book of stories, sentence. The cover is snapshot that I took in Tbilisi of a house across the street where I was staying when we were running a literary program there. Apologies, I'm still under the weather and my voice is hoarse. Um, so it is the most unconventional of my books, and it's a book of kind of linguistic freedom for me. When I first came to the United States, and I was an underground writer back in the Soviet Union, um, I started trying to write in English as an exercise of estrangement of myself from myself, because Russian, when I was trying to write in Russian after coming to to the United States from the Soviet Union, I was sort of depressed, and I knew I'd never be able to go back. That didn't turn out to be the truth, but nonetheless. And I was basically, whenever I was trying to write in Russian, it was an exercise of wallowing in misery and self-pity, and Russian is singularly well suited for that, aiding and abetting you if you want to wallow in misery and self-pity. And so I started writing in English as sort of like putting up a plexiglass wall between myself and my life, because in English I could only be adequate to a very simple sentence with my very limited vocabulary. So I wrote very simple sentences and very simple stories with no deviation to the left or the right, just staying on the path of storytelling. And so gradually, I started feeling more comfortable, more at home with English. And this book is a book of one-sentence stories, in a way trying to negotiate space between English and Russian sentence. The languages are drastically different, and the sentence structure in each is very different. One of the stories in the collection is called "How to Write a Russian Sentence in English." It's a sort of like a joke of sorts, but nonetheless, I just gave myself permission to write in the way that's most comfortable for me, and it also kind of the books to me signify the distance that I covered from between the moment of my arrival to the United States and now the distance in English, the distance in writing. So some 12, 13 years ago, I published a short story in New Yorker called Sentence. And it was one sentence about one evening in the underground literary club to which I belonged. And so, on the spur of the moment, a couple of years ago, I started writing those long one-sentence stories, um, encouraged by one literary magazine whose editor asked me if they could serialize that. I was posting them on Facebook, and he started serializing those. And so, and that's how it started. And then a friend of mine, editor at a small literary press in Canada, asked if I was interested in publishing this as a book. I hadn't thought about it yet. And so I said, well, sure, let's try to do this. So that's how this book came about. And it's a book about it's sort of fiction in many instances. It alternates long sentences with very short ones. There are opening stories 20 plus pages long, but that's followed by stories of like 10 words. So it's stories mainly deal with the memories of a Jewish person from childhood through the different ages of his life, growing up in Leningrad, and then eventually becoming a refusenik and so forth. And so it's a book of memories. It's a book of invention. It's a book of imagination. Imagination is very often just memory uh, uh, pointing backwards. So I'll read. I don't know how much time I have, but a couple of very short excerpts to give you an idea of what the. So one is a little boy being instructed by his father in penmanship. It was a big subject in Soviet schools, in elementary schools. Um, and so, and actually, yes, as I said, imagination is, yes, memory is imagination painting, pointing backwards also. So, so father is keeping on the boy to do this penmanship exercise. It's called чистописание in Russian. And so penmanship, clean writing, clean writing, while my father, dead for a quarter of a century now, whom I have already outlived, is telling me again not to get distracted, to concentrate on my penmanship, because he can see I'm thinking of something extraneous, of what has happened to us all, us and our former God-accursed motherland, of the horror and pure unmitigated evil that Russia has become now, my or anyone else's penmanship notwithstanding, but now is not the time. Concentrate, concentrate, exist in the moment, shut out all the distractions. He is telling me, know that everything in your life is worth paying attention to is right here and now, right here and right now, right in front of and around you, as it always has been, always will be, here and now, and nothing else matters. Nothing else has ever begun to exist here. Only those letters emerging from under your pen, letters, 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 and sentences, penmanship, penmanship, clean writing, clean writing. And so, and then here is a little boy whose grandfather, who is an old Bolshevik living in Moscow, comes to Leningrad, takes him to movies to see a film about the traitor to the motherland, and the boy is scared out of his wits that he also could become a traitor to the motherland, because grandfather tells him that nobody knows how one becomes traitor to the motherland, but one would always be found out and then executed. So in order to make the boy feel a little better, the grandfather takes him to the zoo where he meets another old Stalinist, and they start discussing how life was so much better under Stalin, while the boy gets mesmerized by the sight of a wolf in the cage. Um, um, and yeah. Um, I was looking at the wolf. He was infinitely more important at that moment. Round and round and round and round and round and round he went, as though trying to get rid of himself and his ravaged animal heart. Round and round, what a long life it has been, as if trying to cease to exist. Round and round and round, round and round. Stop already. Inside me, some dangerous dark ardor was growing. Yes, I could tell without knowing anything about anything. The poisonous mushroom of my inner traitor. Yes, and me urging and willing him to stop. Stop, Wolf, stop, if only for an instant, to have mercy on himself, telling him in a silent inner whisper that he was beautiful and I wanted to be like him. Yes, I did like him. Maybe I should stop now. Some things are better left unsaid, written better when not written. Round and round, round and round, round and round, that awful, dark, dank, dirty cage. But then he suddenly stopped. Yes, he suddenly stopped. No other way to put it. Yes, he stopped suddenly, and I looked straight at me. Well, no, not true, not straight at me, not directly, but obliquely. at an imperceptible angle, heavily, hopelessly from his fierce eyes, their pupils aglow with fire and filled with fury, and no one but me seemed to have noticed, and stunned, taken aback, feeling strangely light-headed, I asked him then, silently in my mind, I asked him, yes, the wolf, if he could maybe let me know somehow, in some unspeakable ancient way of the wolf, if I ever at any point in my inconceivable future, in my hopelessly heart-sick life, ran the risk of becoming a traitor to the motherland. Tell me, O wolf, oh tell me. But he only smirked mirthlessly, pulling his bloodless lips away from the corners of his crimson-toothed mouth, and nodded curtly, his scruffy old head with matted dark gray fur, imperceptibly yet unmistakably, though maybe not, before resuming his ceaseless circular motion. And finally, something more measured. That girl. I still remember someone I met in a dream when I was 5 years of age and living in the suburbs of Moscow with my grandparents, a girl my age who knew everything there was to know about me, understood me more fully than anyone else possibly ever could, and was the closest person to me in the entire world. And right away, from the very first, overcome with an almost unbearable happiness, I knew with utmost certainty that we would spend the rest of our lives being inseparable as one and the same person, the most faithful of friends. And she told me she felt the same, even though the two of us had never met in our respective non-dream realities. And she would never visit me again in my sleep. It was just that one night in my early childhood, yet I still remember her name and, if a little vaguely, what she looked like, because I kept thinking about her and waiting for her for years afterwards. It is possible, I believe, that many, if not most of us, go through life missing someone we've never met, someone we don't even know we've been missing. But now that both of our lives are gradually drawing to a close, I no longer hope to see her again in any of my dreams in this reality, no longer waiting. So maybe we'll meet again on the other side or in another life, Tanya. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to add all of our add everyone back to the spotlight, all the authors, and everybody in the audience. Feel free to put any questions you have um, in into the chat. And yeah, we're all here. Yeah, such wonderful presentations, all three of you. Thank you so much. Um, and I'll just say, before I started reading your book, Mikhail, I was a little skeptical, like it might, how is it going to work? A long chapter that's all one sentence, but I found it very readable. And especially and hearing you read it, it's even better. It's like I don't know, it felt like a prose poem to me, sense. So yes, a wonderful way to pass the snowstorm. Everybody who's on the East Coast, good luck with your snowstorm. Okay. So I'm going to just scroll back in the chat, see if anyone had a question yet. Okay. People are everyone's just thanking you. Okay, well, I'm going to start then with a question of my own for all three of you. At the beginning of Merav's presentation, she quoted Anna Ticho saying, it wasn't I who chose Jerusalem, rather Jerusalem chose me. So I want you to take that into your own world and writing and not necessarily Jerusalem, but your subject matter. I mean, did you feel that that it chose you in your writing or the other way around? So that's a question for all three of you. Who wants to go first?
I can say that I didn't plan writing ever, never in my life. It just wasn't. I was a photographer. I studied art, and I was not there with words. And what happened was that I sorry, Susan, you heard it. I married a guy that writes books and write to the newspaper, and his father writes book to the newspaper, and his mother writes books. And then I was sitting there. My parents have a store, maybe few of you knows, in Ramat HaSharon, and they are wonderful people. I love them, but they are, and my mother is she loves books, but we never talked about books the way a family of authors is talking about. Um, and then one day I looked at them and I said, okay, I'm going to be embarrassed now for 30 years. I'm going to sit here and think that they are better than me and they know things that I don't know. Or I can go and study literature. So I went to the University of Tel Aviv while being a photographer of Haaretz magazine. And I just took courses in poetry and in literature, just not to be stupid at dinners. And then when I had this struggle with motherhood and everything, it just went out of me with words. I opened the windows of the dark room that I was printing pictures, and I put a computer and I started writing from my heart. I could not write it. I could not write about this. And when I wrote I Wanted to Be Wonderful, it was also something that I didn't like, oh, what will I write about? This I had in my column. I don't know what to write this week and things, but books, if you write it, it needs to be something from your soul. Like Mikhail now said about this image of this woman that he's longing to it's like it needs to be something really, really that, like you asked, Julie, that chooses you. So I felt that, yeah, that it's beyond me and I have to write it.
I can speak next.
Yes.
I'll speak specifically about Jerusalem. I think, first of all, yes, I agree with Lee that whatever we write about really has to be something we're passionate about, and it often comes through in the writing. And I would say this book specifically really brings together my love of literature and art and of the city of Jerusalem. But even though I started writing this when I was living in Jerusalem, I actually didn't was able to complete it until I was here in Melbourne. And the second book as well also is set primarily in Jerusalem, but it only really came out while I was far away. So sometimes I wonder if there's something in the perspective and that distance that really allows us to, give expression to that passion and that longing for a place.
Hmm. Julie, what was the question? Sorry, I was
Well,
conversing
it
with
was
my cat.
based on the Anna Ticho quote that Merav mentioned at the beginning. It wasn't I who chose Jerusalem, rather Jerusalem chose me. So in terms of your own subject matter for your book, would you say that the subjects chose you, or how do you
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just wanted to give myself maximum degree of freedom in dealing with my memories, and found and that turned out to be the structure that I of a one sentence story with syntax that is basically falls into space, like I said, between the English and Russian sentences. So in some ways, it is a Russian sentence written in English, although not quite, kind of exaggerated Russian sentence. So yeah, it was giving yourself permission to gain the maximum degree of freedom in dealing with your memories. That's what.
And do you think that I'm just going to touch on what Merav just said a minute ago, that you need the distance? I know I think Avi's on this call, and thank you, Avi, for introducing me to Mikhail's work. He also says Avi Landis, he needs to have distance from what he's writing about. Do you also all feel that that you needed not to be in the place where your story takes place?
I can say that I Wanted to Be Wonderful, I wrote while having the pain.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say something in a wider scale that I like when I see now that there are books being written about the 7th of October and movies and series and like, and I look at it amazed, like just a second, like let us digest it and see how. And when I first saw it, like the first book or and it or the movies, I I was like, maybe that's the right thing. Like there are people that can write and work and create in the wound, in the time that it's still bleeding. So when I look at myself, I did write it when a little bit after, and I published it long after, like the crucial moment, but into it. I think you need to write, uh, but sometimes you write something about a wound from the past. So I'm just saying about looking now at people that create things about the 7th of October, which is I understand how strong it is to do it. That's
Merav, Mikhail, do you want to answer that question? Otherwise, we have some other questions coming.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, I do feel, at least with this book and the next one, that I did need that perspective and that distance. And I would say I'm also working on a memoir now, and that one too, I think, took me about 20 years to really write about the depth of the event and the person who's gone, who's at the center of this book. So yes, for me, I definitely did need that distance.
What about you, Mikhail? Could you go ahead?
Well, for me, uh, I wanted to get close to my memories as opposed to very early on. But for me, I'm still writing in a foreign language, and for me, that's a distancing mechanism, anyways. No matter how close I get to myself and my memories, and no matter how free I now feel writing in English, it still is a foreign language for me. Whereas Russian is free air. So I still overcome the resistance of the language, and I love it. But I pay the price in writing in English, and the price is writing in English. So.
Okay, Galina has a question. I'm curious about Merav's research, not so much about the authors themselves, but more about research on Jerusalem and what it was like in the early 20th century. And also for Lee, this is a double question, I guess. Also for Lihi, on her previous book on her own, why did you choose to focus on Russian Jewish immigrants to Israel, and how did you get into the head of these characters who are quite different from your own background? So,
wow. I grew up in the desert, and the book is like about. Someone said once, I think it's Hasfari. I will remember her name in a minute. She said that the distance between Sderot and Tel Aviv, it's longer than from Tel Aviv to New York. So to come from the periphery to the big city, and so my book is about a little bit like that. And I wanted in the book, I have a woman that lives in Tel Aviv, and her son left from Israel to America with his startup. The mother herself, that she lost one son in the war, and one son went to America, so she stays alone. She also an immigrant, like most of this generation at the beginning of Israel. So I really wanted to deal with and the name in Hebrew is Zarot or Zarut, which is strangers or strangerness. So I wanted to have this, also the young woman that is trying to get out of the far city in the middle of the desert, uh, to be to her mother is an immigrant, and I want to say, I will say, the book on her own, I started writing because my brother lived in LA for 30 years. And there was one moment that started it. It's when I saw his kids fix his accent. When the kids of my brother that are super American, they were born in America, they are American, were fixing my brother's accent. And I looked at it and I said, so many generations of Jews had their kids fixing their accent, had their kids being either Tsabarim or Americans or Australian or wherever. And so this was the thing that started the whole thing. Why did I chose her? I'm a bit familiar with the Russian immigrant, but I do feel that it's not being written enough about. And I want to say that Zoya Cherkesky, she's a wonderful, wonderful artist that draws the relationship between the Russian immigration and the Israeli periphery. Google her, she's amazing, and she was so wonderful to give me her permission to put on the cover of my book one of her drawings. Yeah, so it's something in my heart.
I want to address, it wasn't exactly a question, but she was curious about the research that you did for your book.
The research itself, is that I'm going around because I don't want, you remember, I don't want to embarrass anyone, so I don't want to say who is it based on. But it's a single mother, Russian, that is struggling, and she's raising a wonderful, wonderful daughter here, all alone, without a supporting family here. So, and I salute her. She's a young, brave woman.
I'll speak about the research as well for this book. I would say because the stories came together, one by one over the years, I mostly over time, each period that I was writing a particular story was really immersed in the writings or the artworks of a particular woman from this collection. Also, I would say, just working at the Israel Museum, I was very familiar with Anna Ticha, her paintings, her life, and her work. But I think just, living in Jerusalem, the architecture is still so much from that period, from the Ottoman period. And I feel like just walking through the streets, you're still in some ways like living and breathing that life. But I do want to mention, I see that David Reifler is on the call, and his book was immensely influential. The book called Days of Ticho, which really explores in such depth and such breadth as well the life of the Jews and the Ticho family during that period. So I would say that was my main source about Jerusalem then.
Mikhail, did you have to do research for your book or not so much?
Not really. I was just searching my memory and my imagination. Not in this particular book, no. Although it got me back to sometimes, yes, I would Google just to verify my memory about certain things that were happening in the Soviet Union at a certain point.
And you tell your readers to Google things, right? In some of the stories, it says, Google it.
Right. Well, yeah. In one of the stories, one of my students asks what was Gulag, and I say Google Gulag, and I thought how strange that is, Googling Gulag through alliteration. Yeah. So I lived in both worlds where, there was Gulag and there was Google. It's a long life.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up, but I just wanted to say two more things. One is I liked how you mentioned, Merav, that all the characters in your stories are living fragmented lives as migrant artists, which so many of us on this call probably are. Um, and some of us as women, some as not as Jews, we're all, in fledgling, and you would say something about supporting the fledgling state. Well, I feel like we're all still kind of there trying to support the state. And I'll just tell you all a funny story based on what Lihi said about how every generations of Jewish children have been correcting their parents' accents. So, and with my daughter corrected my accent in Hebrew. She was telling me when she was little, Mom, it's not Cinderella, it's Cinderella. Like, I think pretty sure Cinderella comes from English. So anyway, before we end, two things. I'm just going to share my screen for a second. One is, and I'm going to send you all the links, but we have already a lineup for many of the upcoming events. Next month, we have Sonia Dakaret with the roots of the guava tree, growing up Jewish and Arab in Colombia. Ziva Bukai's new book coming out, The World Between, and Yoni Hammer Kasoy, you can't see his full name on the graphic, who translated a new, well, it's not so new, but the anthology called Class of 95 about the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. So that is coming up on February 22nd. The March event is still finalizing. In April, we have, in conjunction with Yom HaShoah, we have Elizabeth Rosner, Martin Herskovitz, and Doron Karen, who talks about his grandfather's book, that was just translated to English. And someone in the registering is asking when is the next in-person event, and that is going to be on Sunday, June 14th. So mark your calendars with Rachel Tzivia back, Susan Kleinman, who's here, and Nora Gold, who is here, I think. So I'll send you all those links. And before we finish, as we've been doing since the 7th of October, praying for the return of all of our hostages, and thank God all of the remaining living hostages were released in October. And so now we are just praying and waiting for one more. And I'll read this, and you can all read along with me. This is the short prayer we say now in my shul on Shabbat. Vrachamim shochen meromim ulifkod berachamim et achino Ran ben Talik v'Yitzchak Vili shenerag al kiddush Hashem ha'am v'ha'aretz yizkareu Elohim l'tova im shar tzadikei olam v'yiviehu mehera lekever Yisrael kmo shene'emar ve'el amo tvi'enu v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'numar. So thank you all for coming. Let me stop sharing. Stop the share. Okay. Thank you to everyone. Special thanks to our authors tonight, Mikhail, Merav, and Lihi. Thanks for everyone in the audience. And go buy their books. They're all three great books. So love doing
Thank
this.
you.
Everyone to bring guys new books.
Thank
Good.
you, everybody.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Bye.
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 Okay. Bye.
Bye.